Hello, I am Parneet Jaggi, and in this second lecture in the series on Look Back in Anger, a play by John Osborne, we're going to be looking at the synopsis or the plot of the play in brief. Now, as we discussed, John Osborne is a popular English playwright, screenwriter, and actor who was known for his intense critical stance towards the established social and political norms, and the success of his play Look Back in Anger transformed the face of the English theatre. Now, this play Look Back in Anger is an important play for several reasons. Number one, it was the first well-known play of the kitchen sink drama, which explores the drama beneath the surface of the mundane domestic life. Now, in this play, the second important thing is the character and the representation of this character as an angry young man who represented the entire generation of the post-World War society of England. Now let's come to a brief summary or synopsis of the play. The play begins in the attic flat apartment of Jimmy Porter, who is the protagonist of the story, and his wife Alison Porter. The setting of the play is mid-1950s, a small town in England. Jimmy and Alison share their apartment with their common friend Cliff Lewis, a young working-class man who is a best friend of Jimmy. Now, Cliff and Jimmy both are coming from a working-class background, though Jimmy has more education than Cliff. He is a university graduate. And they are jointly running a sweet stall as a small business enterprise. But on the other hand, Jimmy's wife Alison comes from a more prominent and prestigious family, which is clearly shown from the beginning of the play that Jimmy resents this very fact. Now, the first act of the play opens on a Sunday in April, and Jimmy and Cliff are reading the Sunday newspapers, while Alison is ironing in a corner of the room. Now, this ironing of clothes is very symbolic in this play. Now, Jimmy is shown as a hot-tempered young man, and he begins to try and provoke Cliff and Alison. So, this is the scene of the setting in the beginning of the play. These are the three characters who are introduced to us as interrelated to each other, but also in contrast to each other. Now, Jimmy is antagonistic towards Cliff's working class background, and he keeps making fun of him for his low intelligence. But Cliff is good-natured, and he takes the antagonism very graciously. Jimmy also attempts to provoke his own wife, Alison, by making fun of her family and her well-heeled life before she had got married to him. Now, Jimmy also, at times and at several places, seems to display a nostalgia for England's powerful past. He notes that now the world has entered a dreary American age, a fact which he is kind of grudgingly accepting. Now, Alison tires of Jimmy's rants and begs for peace, and this makes Jimmy more fevered in his insults. He is not happy with the kind of engrossments Alison makes herself into, and she's all the time busy in the household chores. Now, Cliff has the role of trying to keep peace between the two, and this often leads to a playful scuffle between the two. Now, this kind of a wrestling at one place ends up running into Alison, causing her to fall down, and Jimmy is sorry for this incident of her falling down, but then Alison makes him leave the room. Now, after Jimmy leaves, Alison confides to Cliff, the friend, that she is actually pregnant with Jimmy's child, and that she has not yet disclosed this to Jimmy. So Cliff advises her to tell him, but when Cliff goes out and Jimmy re-enters, the two instead fall into an intimate game. Now, this game also is symbolic, the game of bear and squirrel. So here Jimmy impersonates a stuffed bear and Alison impersonates a toy squirrel. Cliff returns to tell Alison that her old friend Helena Charles has called her on the phone. Alison goes and takes the call and returns with the news that Helena is coming to stay there for a visit. Now, Jimmy doesn't like Helena, this friend of Allison. But so he gets angry. He goes into a rage in which he wishes that Allison would suffer in order to know what it means to be a real person. He curses her, literally curses her, and wishes that she could have a child only to watch it die. Now, 2 weeks later, Helena has already arrived, and Allison discusses her relationship with Jimmy. So there is a series of events which take place here, and all the relationships undergo transformation. Now we have 4 characters in the scene. We have Jimmy, we have Allison, we have their common friend Cliff, and we have Allison's friend Helena. So now when Helena arrives, Allison discusses all her intimate talks and her relationships with Jimmy, with Helena. And she also tells the story of how they met and how in their younger days they used to crash parties with their friend Hugh Tanner. And Hugh Tanner was a friend of Jimmy with whom he maintained an affection, with Hugh Tanner and his mother also. Hugh, because he had to leave the home to travel the world, so Jimmy stayed with Hugh's mother. And Jimmy seems to regret that he could not leave, but he's also angry at Hugh for abandoning his mother. Now, Helena is quite intimate with Allison now when she is staying at her home. And she also inquires about Allison's affectionate relationship with Cliff. And Allison tells her that they are just friends. Now, when Cliff and Jimmy return to the flat after work, and Helena tells them that she and Allison are leaving for church. Now Jimmy gets irritated because he has that anti-religious temperament, and he ends up insulting Allison's family once again, as he has been doing it very often. Now Helena becomes angry at this, and Jimmy dares her to slap him on the face, warning her that he will slap her back. Then he shares the story of how he had watched his father die as a young man in front of his eyes. His father had been injured fighting in the Spanish Civil War and had returned to England only to die shortly after. Now Allison and Helena begin to leave for church, and Jimmy feels betrayed by his wife because now she's listening more to Helena and she's doing what Helena is saying. Then there is a phone call for Jimmy and he leaves the room. Then Helena tells Allison that she has already called Allison's father to come and get her and take her away from this abusive home where Allison is not comfortable. Now Allison relents. It comes as a surprise to her, and she says that she will go when her father picks up the next day. Now when Jimmy returns, he tells Allison that Mrs. Tanner, Hugh Tanner's mother, with whom he is quite attached even now, has become sick and she is just about to die. So Jimmy decides to visit that old lady, and he also demands that Allison should make a choice of whether to go with Helena or to go with him. Now Allison picks up her things and leaves for church. So she opts for the other way out and not going with her husband. And Jimmy collapses on the bed, heartbroken by his wife's decision. Now the next evening we see that Allison is packing her things and she's talking to her father, Colonel Redfern. Now this Colonel Redfern is an important character insofar as he represents the other class of British England, the Imperial British England, though he is a soft-spoken man who realizes that he does not quite understand the kind of love that Jimmy and Allison shares. He admits that the actions of his and his wife are partly to blame for their fight or split that they are now facing. Now this colonel has been an officer in the British military services and has served in India, and he's quite nostalgic about his time spent in India. And he considers this service to be some of the best years of his life. Alison observes that her father is hurt because the present is not the past, and Jimmy is hurt because he feels the present is only the past. So they are kind of juxtaposed as contrasting characters in the eyes of Alison. Now Alison packs, but then she decides not to do so, packs her toy squirrel, but then she decides to leave it back. Now during that scene, Helena and Cliff enter. So Jimmy is not there, Jimmy is absent. Alison leaves a letter for Jimmy explaining why she has left and gives it to Cliff to hand it over to Jimmy. Now Alison leaves the home. After Alison leaves, Cliff becomes angry, gives the letter to Helena and blames her for the entire situation. Jimmy returns home, bewildered that he's almost hit by Colonel Redfern's car and that Cliff pretended not to see him when he was walking by on the street. He reads Alison's letter and becomes very angry. Helena tells him that Alison is pregnant, but Jimmy says that he doesn't care. He insults Helena and she slaps him, and then they kind of tie up as lovers. Now several months have passed in between. There is a gap of several months, and when the third act opens, Jimmy and Cliff are once again reading the Sunday newspapers, while Helena stands in the corner of the house ironing clothes. Now Jimmy and Cliff are still engaged in their angry discussion and Helena's religious tendencies have taken the brunt of Jimmy's punishment. Now Jimmy and Cliff perform scenes from musicals and comedies, but when Helena leaves, Cliff notes that things do not feel the same with her here. So he kind of misses Alison. Cliff then discloses it to Jimmy that he wants to move out of the apartment. Jimmy takes the news quite calmly and tells him that he has always been a loyal friend and is worth more than any woman. So when Helena returns, the three plan to go out and Alison suddenly enters. Now this is the last section of the play. Now when Alison comes back in the apartment after several months, Alison and Helena start talking and Jimmy leaves the room. He begins to loudly play his trumpet, as he often does. Now this trumpet is also symbolic of his escapism from all that frustration that he goes through. Now in the meantime, all these months, what Alison has been suffering is that she has lost her baby already and she looks immensely sick. So Helena tells Alison that she should be angry with her for what Helena has done to her. She has taken hold of her household, but Alison is just grieved by the loss of her baby. She's not really concerned with what is happening to other relationships or the other scene around her. Now Helena is driven to distraction by Jimmy's loud trumpet playing, and she demands that he come into the room. So when he comes back in, he laments the fact that Alison has lost the baby, but he shrugs it off. Helena then tells Jimmy and Alison that her sense of morality means what is right, what is wrong, what she has done, what she should not have been done, has not yet diminished, and that she knows that she must be leaving their home. Alison, though, attempts to persuade her to stay, telling her that Jimmy will be alone if she leaves, but she leaves. So now as we see towards the end of the play, when Helena leaves, Jimmy attempts to once again show that anger over Alison. But Alison tells him that now she's gone through the emotional and physical suffering and the trauma that he has always wanted her to feel. He realizes that she has suffered greatly, has become just like him, sorrowful, pathetic, and so he becomes softer and more tender towards her. So they kind of have a new kind of an understanding now as a husband and wife, and here the play ends with Jimmy and Alison embracing each other, once again playing their game of bear and squirrel. So this was how the plot moved, although slow, but intensely with the kind of relationships that Osborne wanted to show as the post-World War scene of a family. So here we are with a plot and an overview of the play. We'll continue with this in the next lecture of the series. Thank you for now.